every Pope Pius in church history. Throughout the centuries, the papacy has played a central role in shaping the course of Christian history. Among the many popes who have guided the Catholic Church through times of peace and conflict, prosperity and upheaval, 12 have chosen the name Pius. Spanning nearly 2,000 years, these popes led during moments of doctrinal crisis, political revolution, world war, and sweeping religious reform. Each one left a distinct mark on the Church, and many of their decisions still influence Catholic life today. In this video, we will explore the lives and legacies of every pope who took the name Pius, from the early Church to the 2nd century to the dawn of the nuclear age in the 20th. We will look at who they were, where they came from, and what they believed, and how they shaped their times. We will also examine the most important documents they issued, the theological battles they fought, the reforms they enacted, and the way each of them died. Whether a canonized saint, a political prisoner, or a forgotten footnote, each Pope Pius tells part of the greater story of the Catholic Church and the world it inhabits. Let us begin with the first man to bear the name, Pope Pius I. Pius I, circa AD 140 to 154. Pope Pius I stands in the 10th place in the unbroken line of popes that begins with St. Peter. Sources agree that he was born near the end of the 1st century, most likely between the years 90 and 100 AD, in the Roman colony of Aquileia in northern Italy. Later writers call his father Rufinus and describe the family as freed slaves, a reminder that early Christian leadership often drew from humble roots. His original name has not survived, but a 2nd century work called The Shepherd of Hermas claims him as the brother of the author Hermas, suggesting that the future pope grew up in a household already known for Christian devotion and prophetic vision. When Pius became Bishop of Rome around the year 140, the young church was wrestling with doctrinal confusion and regional diversity. Christian theologians in Asia Minor celebrated Easter on the date of the Jewish Passover, while others insisted it be fixed on a Sunday. According to later tradition, Pius settled the matter for Rome by directing that the feast remain on Sunday, an early step toward a common liturgical calendar. He confronted the rising influence of Gnosticism, a movement that presented salvation as secret knowledge rather than faith in Christ. Gnostic teachers such as Valentinus and Marcion reached the capital during his tenure, so Pius supported writers like Justin Martyr, who argued for the full humanity of Jesus and the goodness of creation. Although the formal term papal bull did not exist at this time, fragments of his decrees show a concern for orderly baptism and proper reception of converts. No statement from him qualifies as ex cathedra because the definition of that teaching authority lay centuries ahead, yet his decisions set precedents that later popes would invoke. Exactly how Pius died remains uncertain. 5th century chroniclers honored him as a martyr, but earlier evidence points to a natural death in Rome around the year 154. Whether killed for the faith or dying peacefully after 14 years of service, he left behind a Roman community better organized and better prepared to face both heresy and persecution. His example of steady administration and doctrinal clarity gave later popes a model to follow, and his place as the 10th successor to Peter secures his memory at the foundation of the Catholic tradition. Pius II, 1458 through 1464. Pius II is counted as the 210th pope after St. Peter. He was born Enea Silvio Bartolomeo Piccolomini on October 18, 1405, in Corsignano, a small hill village in Tuscany. Trained as a lawyer, diplomat, and celebrated Renaissance humanist, he served emperors and bishops before entering the College of Cardinals in 1456. The Conclave of 1458 chose him as pope during a turbulent moment for Europe, only 5 years after the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks. He took the name Pius to honor the loyal Roman patriot in Virgil's epic, hoping to present himself as a pious defender of Christendom. During his 6-year reign, he issued several notable papal bulls, formal decrees sealed with lead. Execrabilis in 1460 outlawed any appeal from papal judgments to a future church Church Council, striking at the conciliar movement that challenged papal authority. Ecclesiam Christi in 1460 summoned a 3-year crusade against the Ottoman Empire, and Cum Ulmam Nostrum Urbem in 1462 placed Rome's ancient ruins under papal protection, threatening excommunication for anyone who damaged them. None of his teachings qualified as ex cathedra, the modern legal term for an infallible definition, but these bulls showed his determination to defend both doctrine and cultural heritage. Pius convened the Congress of Mantua in 1459 to organize the crusade, and, although European monarchs offered little support, he personally traveled to Ancona in 1464 hoping to embark with the fleet. There he succumbed to a malarial fever on August 14, 1464, before the ships could sail. His body was returned to Rome, while his hometown was rebuilt and renamed Pienza in his honor, becoming one of the earliest examples of Renaissance urban planning. The writings he left behind, including his frank autobiographical commentaries, continue to give historians an unusually candid portrait of a 15th century pope. Pius III, 1503. Pius III is recognized as the 215th successor of St. Peter. He was born Francesco Todeschini Piccolomini on May 29, 1439, in Siena, a member of the same Tuscan family that had produced Pope Pius II, his maternal uncle and mentor. Raised amid humanist scholarship, he studied canon law at Perugia and entered the Roman Curia, where his integrity and administrative skill earned him steady promotion. Cardinalate followed in 1460, and for more than 40 years he served as diplomat, legate, and chief deacon in papal ceremonies, quietly guiding affairs under 4 very different pontiffs. After the turbulent Borgia era, the conclave of September 1503 sought a neutral healer and chose the 64-year-old Piccolomini, who took his uncle's name to signal continuity and reform. He announced plans to clean up the Curia's finances, strengthen peace within the Papal States, and call a council of cardinals to address long-standing abuses. With only 26 days on the throne, he issued a handful of briefs, rather than full papal bulls, none rising to the level of infallible definition. Yet his program hinted at overdue renewal. A chronic leg ulcer grew septic, and on October 18, 1503, he died in the Vatican Palace, leaving the Church to wonder what a longer reign might have achieved. His short, yet dignified papacy provided a moment of calm between the scandals of Alexander VI and the vigorous policies of Julius II. Pius IV, 1559 to 1565. Pius IV is the 224th pope in succession after St. Peter. He was born Giovanni Angelo Medici on March 31st, 1499 in Milan, a junior branch of the famous Florentine family. Trained in both medicine and canon law, he entered papal service as a judge and diplomat and gained the cardinal's hat in 1549. When Pope Paul IV died in 1559, the College of Cardinals turned to Medici for his reputation as a conciliator and an able administrator. After 3 weeks of deliberation, they elected him, and he chose the name Pius IV, wishing to emphasize personal piety rather than dynastic ambition. His pontificate is remembered above all for completing the Council of Trent, the great reform assembly of the Counter-Reformation. He reconvened the council in January of 1562, guided it through heated debates on episcopal duties and the sacraments, and accepted its decrees on December 4th, 1563. To give those decisions binding force, he issued the bull Benedictus Deus, Latin for Blessed God, on January 26, 1564, requiring every Catholic to obey the Tridentine canons. In the same year, he published the Tridentine Profession of Faith, an oath that teachers and clergy must recite, and reorganized the Roman Curia to implement stricter discipline. No definition he made meets the later standard for ex cathedra infallibility, yet his legislation shaped Catholic doctrine and worship for centuries. Pius IV relied heavily on his energetic nephew, Cardinal Charles Borromeo, encouraged charitable hospitals, and commissioned Michelangelo's last architectural project, the imposing city gate now called Porta Pia. He died in Rome on December 9, 1565, after severe kidney stone attacks and fever. Although his reign lasted only 6 years, he left a streamlined curia, a clarified creed, and a church newly armed to face the challenges of the Protestant Reformation. Pius V, 1566 to 1572. Pius V is counted as the 225th successor of St. Peter. He was born Antonio Ghisleri on January 17, 1504 in the small town of Bosco Marengo in the Duchy of Milan. At 15, he entered the Dominican order, where he embraced a life of strict prayer, study, and poverty. Years of teaching theology and serving as inquisitor revealed his uncompromising zeal for doctrinal purity. Created a cardinal in 1557, he became a leading voice for the reforms demanded by the recently concluded Council of Trent. When the conclave met after the death of Pius IV, the cardinals chose Ghisleri on January 7th of 1566, convinced that his integrity could strengthen the Church in the face of Protestant expansion. He kept the white Dominican habit, a custom that helped establish white as the normal color of papal dress. During his 6-year pontificate, he pushed Trent from theory into practice. In 1568, he issued a revised breviary, the prayer book for clergy, and in 1570, the bull Quo Primum promulgated and standardized Roman Missal that unified the celebration of the Mass throughout the Latin Church. The bull Regnans in Excelsis on February 1570 excommunicated Queen Elizabeth I of England and released her subjects from allegiance, a bold move that underscored his refusal to compromise with what he considered heresy. Another document, Consuverant Romani Pontifices of 1569, praised the rosary as a simple yet powerful form of prayer and encouraged its widespread use. None of these decrees qualified as ex cathedra, yet their authority shaped Catholic worship and discipline for centuries. Beyond Rome, he rallied Catholic princes to confront Ottoman naval power. His diplomacy forged the Holy League of Spain, Venice, and the Papal States. On October 7, 1571, their fleets won the Battle of Lepanto, a victory Pius credited to the intercession of the Virgin Mary. He instituted the Feast of Our Lady of Victory, later renamed Our Lady of the Rosary, to mark the event. At home, he enforced clerical residency, curbed the traffic of benefices, and required bishops to preach regularly and visit their dioceses, steps that answered long-standing complaints of laxity. He encouraged charitable work, founded seminaries, and renovated the city's aqueducts. But he also intensified the Roman Inquisition against suspected heresy. Pius V fell ill with a painful illness of the kidneys and passed away in Rome on May 1, 1572. His austere holiness, decisive reforms, and unyielding defense of Catholic doctrine earned him canonization in 1712, and secured his reputation as one of the most influential figures of the Counter-Reformation. Pius VI, 1775 through 1799. Pius VI stands as the 250th successor of St. Peter. He was born Giovanni Angelo Braschi on December 25, 1717, in Cesena, a town of the Papal States, to a noble but financially modest family. Trained in law at Ferrara, he rose through curial ranks as secretary, auditor, and treasurer, earning a reputation for courtesy and administrative skill. After the death of Clement XIV, the conclave elected him on February 15, 1775. He chose the name Pius VI to honor his predecessors who had defended papal rights, knowing that Europe was entering an era of restless change. From the moment he took the throne, he faced pressure from enlightened monarchs who wanted to curb papal influence. Emperor Joseph II reorganized Austrian church life without Rome's approval, a policy called Josephinism, while the Synod of Pistoia in Tuscany promoted ideals tinged with Jansenism and Gallican independence. Pius answered on August 28, 1794, with the bull Auctorem Fidei, a sweeping condemnation of 85 propositions from that synod. Earlier briefs, such as Quod Aliquantum in 1791, rejected the French civil constitution of the clergy, which tried to place bishops under state control. None of these documents reached the later standard of ex cathedra infallibility, yet they firmly restated papal authority over doctrine and discipline. Within the Papal States, he sponsored public works that drained parts of the Pontine Marshes, improved roads, and expanded the Vatican museums with the new Pio-Clementine galleries. Despite these achievements, his reign grew clouded by the French Revolution. In February of 1798, French troops occupied Rome, declared a republic, and forced the aging pontiff into exile. He was moved north through Siena and Turin, then across the Alps to Valence in southeastern France. Worn by travel, illness of the urinary tract, and deep sorrow over the church's plight, he died there on August 29, 1799. His body was returned to Rome 5 years later when political fortunes shifted. Pius VI's long and tragic pontificate closed the 18th century with a vivid lesson on the limits of spiritual power in a revolutionary age. Pius VII, 1800 to 1823. Pius VII is the 251st pope in direct succession from St. Peter. He was born Barnaba Niccolo Maria Luigi Chiaramonti on August 14, 1742, in Cesena, a town of the Papal States. After joining the Benedictine order, he taught theology, became abbot, and was named a bishop at the age of 34. Elevated to the College of Cardinals in 1785, he gained a reputation for learning and calm good sense. When the conclave met in Venice following the death of Pius VI, the cardinals elected Chiaramonti on March 14, 1800. He chose the name Pius VII to honor his fallen predecessor and signal continuity in a time of political upheaval. At the start of his reign, Europe was dominated by Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1801, Pius signed the Concordat with France, restoring legal status to the church there while accepting the loss of church property. He journeyed to Paris in 1804 to crown Napoleon, hoping the gesture would secure lasting peace. Relations soon soured. When Napoleon annexed the Papal States in 1809, the Pope excommunicated those responsible. French troops arrested him and carried him first to Savona and later to Fontainebleau, where he endured 5 years of guarded isolation. Pressured into signing the so-called Concordat of Fontainebleau, he later retracted the document and refused to abandon spiritual authority. Allied victories in 1814 freed him, and he returned to Rome to a hero's welcome. Once restored, he worked to heal the wounds of war. On August 7, 1814, he issued the brief Solicitudo Omnium Ecclesiarum, fully restoring the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits, which had been suppressed for 41 years. In 1821, his bull Ecclesiam e Jesu Christu condemned the Carbonari, an anti-clerical secret society active in Italy and France. Though none of his declarations met the later criteria for an infallible ex cathedra definition, they guided Catholic life through a rapidly changing age. Pius VII encouraged missionary activity, reformed the Roman seminary, and commissioned new galleries for the Vatican museums. A fall in July of 1823 fractured his hip, and complications soon set in. He died in Rome on August 20th, 1823, remembered for courage in captivity and for steering the papacy through the storms of the Napoleonic era. Pius VIII, 1829 through 1830. Pius VIII is the 253rd successor of St. Peter. He entered the world as Francesco Saverio Castiglione on November 20th, 1761, in the hill town of Singoli in the Papal States. After studies in the classic disciplines of canon and civil law, he was ordained a priest, quickly gained notice for gentle learning, and rose to serve as Bishop of Montalto, and later as Cardinal. His reserved manner masked a strong fidelity to traditional doctrine, something that recommended him to the electors when Pope Leo XII died. On March 31st, 1829, the conclave chose him, and he took the name Pius VIII to link his mission with the recent popes who had defended the faith against revolutionary turmoil. His brief 20-month pontificate opened with the encyclical Traditi Humilitati, Latin for humble teachings entrusted, which laid out his program. In clear prose, he warned against religious indifferentism, the idea that one religion is as good as another, and condemned secret societies such as Freemasonry that worked in the shadows against church and state. He reaffirmed earlier papal bans and called on bishops to guard their flocks. Near the end of his reign, he addressed the thorny question of mixed marriages between Catholics and Protestants, insisting that children be raised in the Catholic faith and that the Catholic spouse retain freedom of worship. These instructions came in a papal brief rather than a solemn bull, and none of his declarations rose to the modern standard of an ex cathedra infallible definition, but they carried considerable moral weight for governments then debating religious equality. Persistent illness dogged him from the beginning, a painful stomach tumor combined with chronic liver disease, and by late November 1830 he could scarcely take food or draw breath. He received the sacraments and died in the Quirinal Palace on November 30th of 1830, at the age of 69. Although his reign was the second shortest of any Pope Pius, his firm yet measured responses to indifferentism, secret societies, and marriage questions provided clear guidance at a moment when liberal ideas were sweeping across Europe. Pius IX, 1846 to 1878. Pius IX is the 255th successor of St. Peter. He entered the world as Giovanni Maria Mastai Ferretti on May 13, 1792, in Senegalia, a port town in the Papal States. As a young priest, he struggled with epilepsy, yet impressed his superiors through pastoral warmth and diplomatic skill, serving as a missionary auditor in Chile, then as Bishop of Spoleto, and later of Imola. Pope Gregory XVI created him a cardinal in 1840. After Gregory's death, the conclave elected Mastai Ferretti on June 16, 1846, and he chose the name Pius IX to honor earlier popes who had defended the faith in turbulent times. The new pope began with a wave of liberal gestures. He granted a general amnesty to political prisoners, approved a modest constitution for the Papal States, and supported railway construction and public health projects. His outlook, hardened after the revolutions of 1848, forced him to flee Rome to Geisha. French troops restored him, and his remaining years were marked by firm opposition to nationalism and secular liberalism. Among many documents, he issued the Apostolic Constitution Ineffabilis Deus on December 8, 1854, which solemnly defined the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary. Because he formally invoked his supreme teaching authority while addressing the entire Church, this statement stands as an ex cathedra pronouncement that Catholics hold to be infallible. In 1864, his encyclical, Quanta Cura, appeared with an appendix titled The Syllabus of Errors, a listing of modern ideas that he judged incompatible with Catholic doctrine, including religious indifferentism and state supremacy over the Church. Pius IX convened the First Vatican Council in 1869. The Council's dogmatic constitution, Pastor Aeternus, affirmed papal infallibility when the Pope speaks ex cathedra on faith or morals, a teaching he quickly promulgated. While the Council was still in session, the forces of the Kingdom of Italy captured Rome in September of 1870, ending papal temporal rule. Pius refused to recognize the new regime and described himself as a prisoner in the Vatican, confining his movements to the tiny Leonine city. He nevertheless expanded missionary work, approved new religious congregations, and encouraged devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. After nearly 32 years on the throne, the longest verified reign of any pope, he died in the Apostolic Palace on February 7, 1878. Physicians cited complications from epilepsy and a stroke brought on by old age. His body now rests in the Basilica of San Lorenzo Fuori, Lamura. Beatified in 2000, Pius IX remains a pivotal figure whose pontificate reshaped Catholic doctrine, defined papal authority, and marked a decisive break between the papacy and secular European power. Pius X, 1903 to 1914. Pius X is the 257th successor of St. Peter. He was born Giuseppe Melicore Sarto on June 2, 1835, in the rural village of Ries, part of the Austrian-ruled Lombardy, Venetia. The son of a postal clerk and a seamstress, he grew up in modest circumstances, studied for the priesthood at Padua, and became known for personal holiness and practical charity. After serving as Bishop of Mantua and Patriarch of Venice, he entered the conclave of 1903 as a respected but little publicized cardinal. When political pressures from Austria vetoed the leading candidate, the cardinals turned to Sarto, electing him on August 4, 1903. He chose the name Pius X to signal fidelity to tradition at the opening of a new century. His first public act was the Motu Proprio Trelle Solicitudini, issued on November 22, 1903, which urged a return to Gregorian chant and dignified congregational singing. In 1907, he issued the encyclical Pascendi Dominici Gregis, condemning modernism, a movement that attempted to reinterpret Catholic doctrine through contemporary philosophy. That same year, the Holy Office published the syllabus Lamentabili Sani, and in 1910 he required all clergy and theology professors to swear the anti-modernist oath Sacrorum Antistatum. He encouraged frequent communion, lowered the customary age for First Communion to about 7 through the decree Quam Singulari on August 8, 1910, and promoted daily Bible study. Although he proclaimed no teaching that meets the later definition of an ex cathedra statement, his firm assertions on doctrine and worship left a lasting mark on Catholic life. Administrative reform also defined his pontificate. He reorganized the Roman Curia, established new departments for charitable works, and launched the comprehensive codification of canon law that would be published after his death. When war erupted among European powers in late July 1914, he suffered acute grief, praying for peace while watching long-prepared alliances collapse. Already weakened by respiratory illness, he endured a heart attack and died in the Apostolic Palace on August 20th, 1914. Canonized in 1954, Pius X is remembered for personal simplicity, zeal for the Eucharist, and his uncompromising stand against ideas he judged harmful to the faith. Pius XI, 1922 to 1939. Pius XI is the 259th successor of St. Peter. He was born Ambrogio Damiano Achille Ratti on May 31st, 1857 in Desio, a Lombard village, then ruled by the Austrian Empire. The son of a silk factory manager, he was drawn early to scholarship and the mountains, earning doctorates in theology and canon law, cataloging manuscripts for the Ambrosian Library, and spending holidays as an accomplished alpine climber. Ordained in 1879, he served as church historian, librarian, and papal diplomat before Benedict XV appointed him Archbishop of Milan and created him a cardinal. When Benedict died in January of 1922, the conclave elected Ratti on February 6, 1922, and he chose the name Pius XI to link a forward-looking agenda with the firm doctrinal stance of his predecessors. The first decade of his reign centered on settling the Roman question, the long dispute between the Holy See and the Kingdom of Italy. On February 11, 1929, he signed the Lateran Treaty, a set of agreements that recognized Vatican City as an independent, sovereign state and compensated the Church for the loss of the Papal States. With independence secured, he turned to spiritual initiatives. His encyclical Quo Primum, issued in December 1925, established the Feast of Christ the King to remind nations that earthly power must serve a higher law. He encouraged Catholic action, a lay movement for evangelization and social charity, and founded missions and scientific institutes, among them the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. No definition he gave meets the modern standard of an infallible ex cathedra pronouncement, yet his teaching documents shaped Catholic life throughout the century. As the totalitarian movement spread, he condemned them in forceful language. The German encyclical Mit brennender Sorge, smuggled into the Reich and read from pulpits on Palm Sunday, March 21st, 1937, denounced racism and the cult of the state. Weeks later, the Latin encyclical Divini Redemptoris, on March 19, 1937, rejected atheistic communism, while the Italian letter Non abbiamo bisogno, on June 29th of 1931, attacked the excess of fascism. He also reminded employers and governments of their duties toward workers in Quadragesimo Anno, published on May 15, 1931, to mark 40 years since Leo XIII's landmark social teaching. These documents framed the Church's moral responses to the crises of the interwar world. Repeated bouts of bronchitis aggravated a chronic heart condition, and during the night of February 9th through the 10th, 1939, he suffered a fatal heart attack in the Apostolic Palace at the age of 81. His funeral procession crossed the new Vatican city-state he had created, a small but sovereign territory that still embodies his vision of the papacy, free to speak to the nations. Pius XII, 1939 through 1958. Pius XII is the 260th successor of St. Peter. He was born Eugenio Maria Giuseppe Giovanni Pacelli on March 2nd of 1876 in Rome, into a family of papal lawyers and diplomats. Gifted in languages and diplomacy, he entered the Vatican Secretariat of State, served as nuncio in Germany after the First World War, and became Cardinal Secretary of State in 1930. The conclave that followed the death of Pius XI elected him on his 63rd birthday, March 2, 1939, and he chose the name Pius XII to emphasize continuity in defending the faith during a mounting global crisis. Only months after his election, Europe plunged into war. His first encyclical, Summi Pontificatus, issued on October 20th, 1939, warned against racism and totalitarian ideology and appealed for the protection of civilians. Maintaining formal neutrality, he used Vatican radio broadcasts, diplomatic channels, and the distribution of forged baptismal papers to ease the suffering of Jews and other persecuted groups. Contemporary witnesses praised these efforts, though later historians have debated the public silence he kept while working behind the scenes. Pius XII guided Catholic thought with a series of influential documents. Mystici Corporis Christi, on June 29th of 1943, explained the Church as the mystical body of Christ. Divino Afflante Spiritu, on September 30th of 1943, encouraged modern biblical scholarship. Mediator Dei, in November 20th of 1947, opened the way to liturgical renewal, leading to the restoration of the Easter Vigil in 1951 and a complete revision of Holy Week rites in 1955. On November 1st, 1950, he issued the Apostolic Constitution, Munificentissimus Deus, formally defining the Assumption of Mary as dogma, the only ex cathedra pronouncement of his entire pontificate. That same decade, he approved a decree that barred Catholics from supporting communist parties, judging atheistic materialism incompatible with Christian faith. After long hours of work and fasting, his health declined. While staying at Castel Gandolfo, he suffered a severe myocardial infarction, compounded by exhaustion, and died in the early hours of October 9th, 1958. His doctor listed acute heart failure as the cause of death. Pius XII left a complex legacy marked by theological depth, administrative reform, and wartime controversy. Yet his teachings on Scripture, liturgy, and Marian doctrine continue to shape Catholic life today. Conclusion. From the persecuted house churches of the 2nd century to the diplomatic battlegrounds of the Cold War, the 12 popes who chose the name Pius formed a thread of continuity that runs through almost every major chapter of Catholic history. Each stepped into office at a moment when the Church faced pressing questions about doctrine, authority, worship, or survival, and each answered in a way that bore lasting fruit. Pius I stabilized a young community against Gnostic speculation. Pius V rallied a divided Christendom at Lepanto. Pius IX defined papal infallibility while watching temporal power slip away. And Pius XII carried theological renewal forward amid the darkest war the modern world had yet seen. Their shared name, drawn from the Latin word for dutiful devotion, became a public pledge to guard tradition while guiding change. Although separated by culture, language, and circumstance, the Popes Pius reveal recurring patterns. They defended core beliefs when new ideologies threatened, reformed internal discipline when complacency set in, and harnessed new tools of communication to reach an ever wider flock. Some reigned only weeks, others more than 3 decades. Yet all left documents, decisions, and examples that shaped the faith of millions. By tracing their stories in sequence, we see how the office they held evolved, how their teaching authority expanded, and how the unbroken line from Peter passed through their hands to the present day. This journey through the lives of the Popes Pius offers more than a collection of dates and decrees. It provides a panoramic view of how the papacy has responded to the changing face of history while maintaining a single, steady mission.